Those who worship the Lord worship in spirit and truth. Those who say that they know Him must walk as He walked. Those who worship the Lord worship in spirit and truth. Those who say that they know Him must walk as He walked. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. If we say that we know Him, but we don't keep His word, then we walk in the darkness, and the truth's not in us. If we walk in the light, we will have fellowship sweet, and the blood of Jesus will cleanse us from sin. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light. He is the way and the truth, and in Him is the life. If we obey His word, then we walk in the light.
Well, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? Good to be with you. Happy New Year to you. And we are in a in a new year for sure. And Stephanie, good morning to you there in Pennsylvania. Melody didn't get to say good morning to you. And I think I captured everybody else so far that said good morning. So I'm saying good morning greetings to all of you as well. So anyway, yeah, it's not really snowing outside. That's just the background I'm using for this week anyway. We are continuing our 50-day study in the life of Christ, and we're at day 30 actually now. Finally, it's taken us quite a while to get there. Good morning, Steve and Donna as well. Want to give my greetings to all of you as I'm able here this morning. Hopefully you had a good Christmas season. I know we had a little bit of time together between Christmas and New Year's, and then I was off this last week as Wendy and I got away for a little breakaway from everything. Making a few adjustments here on the fly, so bear with me as I continue talking. 36th year of marriage, of that woman, crazy woman, being married to me. She is a saint, absolutely no doubt about it. And so we were with some friends. Beautiful area we went to. If you've never been to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, a great area. If you like things like museums, if you like things like, a little bit of hiking, if you like quaint towns and shopping, maybe a little bit different than what we have here. Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Did I say New Hampshire? Stockbridge, Massachusetts, um, is been voted or recognized as the most Christmassy main street in America during the Christmas season, and we could certainly see why. I mean, Norman Rockwell, that's where Norman Rockwell lived. We got to visit the Norman Rockwell Museum. But some of the things that he drew came right out of that town of Stockbridge. And just an amazing place. I encourage you to go visit that if you're down there. It's a great place just to go, even for a few days. If you could go spend there, go spend a few days there at least. It's well worth it. If you like hiking, there's some great hiking trails there. There's several little towns kind of all nestled close together that you can get into little towns and see little things, and just several different things. Priscilla's saying she'd been there many times. It's a great town, yeah, and probably wasn't that far away from you guys where you were living for many years down there. Just a great place. So I want to. This is not a paid advertisement at all. Just sharing what we did with our good friends Kevin and Michelle Sensenig. Michelle was Wendy's college roommate, and so we've, over the last few years, struck up the opportunity to try to get away once a year together, and it happened to be over the Christmas break, and it was fantastic. So, but good being back with you today as we continue trekking on. We did take a little break for a few days and deal with some Christmas-focused themes and Hanukkah-focused themes. Now we're past that, and and some we're still celebrating. Some don't just celebrate one day of Christmas. Some do celebrate 12 days of Christmas. Some celebrate from the Western tradition of Christmas and then celebrate all the way into the Eastern Orthodox tradition of Christmas, which is like a week later. And so they celebrate Christmas that whole time. What a wonderful thing to celebrate, the birth of Christ, the advent of Christ, all that he brought, all the wonder that was there, things that we looked at before. And I certainly think that is a wonderful thing to do for those that practice that. For a lot of us, it was the commercialized aspect of Christmas, and even just a very scant, maybe the month of Advent leading up to Christmas, maybe. And many of us, perhaps in a Christian tradition, grew up with, we just did something maybe special on Christmas, and that was it. But there's so much around that holiday and so much anticipation leading up to Christmas, and then things leading after Christmas and the next holidays that will come. Things that we look forward to. So several of you commenting back here in the comments about Stockbridge. Priscilla, I don't know who Arlo Guthrie was. I'd have to research who Arlo Guthrie was. And Walter Huss saying took a few school field trips there. Yeah, just a great place. And I would just say, if you want to get away somewhere, it is 5-hour drive from here, but it is a great little place to get away. Even a family place, I would say. Some things you can do with your family there as well. So, but we're continuing in the life of Christ. We're in phase 5. We're in leadership development. He is now developing his leaders and getting them up to speed, because he is moving toward the time of his crucifixion, resurrection, and Priscilla commenting, Arlo was a hippie songwriter, Woody Guthrie's son. I would have to go back. I'd have to go back and research all that. It's fascinating information, things that people have lived through the 60s twice would know about, right? And I have only reached the 60s once. Well, I guess I've reached the 60s twice. I was born in the 60s. Now I'm in my 60s. But Priscilla, you lived through the 60s, and I was going to say partied through the 60s. It's probably true, likely. But Jesus, let's go back to Jesus here. Jesus creates a different leadership pathway than maybe what we're used to in the world. And in the world system, it's the idea of of being a boss. It's the idea of, the leader tells others what to do, and Jesus' model is the leader gets out front and leads other people. And you see this in some military scenes and in some military writings, some of those leaders charging the hill and the general riding out in front, or the colonel or whoever's leading the charge, leading out in front of the troops. And for us, that is kind of the model that Jesus isn't kind of. That is the model that Jesus sets. He sets a model of humility. He sets a model of leadership. He sets a model of love. He sets a model of faith. And some of these things are things that I'm thinking about. Then he also sets a model of knowing who the authority is. God is the authority, but also the idea that we in our own lives have a measure of authority given to us, and we need to lean into that spiritual authority, something that sometimes maybe we don't think a lot about. Some maybe think too much about it and want to assume too much authority. But there is a measure of authority that we have over spiritual things in our lives, and we need to lean into that authority, that God-given authority. But then also submitting to authority, the authority of God in our lives. So thinking about what Mark said here, my friend Mark, Mark Edwards, who wrote this particular study, he said, "I struggle with all four aspects of leadership and so need Jesus living in me and through me to be the leader he calls me to be." I mean, you think about it, how difficult is it sometimes to love? How difficult is it sometimes to be humble? How difficult is it sometimes to remember that God is our authority? How difficult is it sometimes to have faith in God? I'd asked you to pray about something several weeks ago, and it looks like on Saturday afternoon, this particular thing I've asked you to pray about is going to come to fruition about 1:30, I think. Continue praying through that, but it's something that does create incredible freedom for Wendy and I, and ministry freedom, life freedom. And so I just ask that you just keep praying for one more day through tomorrow afternoon, and we'll be signing some papers, and I think that's going to leave us in a much more comfortable place in many, many ways. So I don't want to get into all that. I just have asked you to pray, and so I just ask you to continue praying for that. But faith, I mean, what does faith look like in our lives? What does faith look like in your life? Where do you need to trust God? Where do I need to trust God? As a leader, I'm thinking, okay, I need to trust God. I need today and next week to be making a whole bunch of phone calls and getting appointments set up to meet with a whole bunch of people about the college. And I need to have faith that the Lord will open the channels and open the doors and give me good responses to people that I need to sit down with and talk with. There are many great things going on, but that's an area where I need faith that the Lord will open the doors. And for you today, where do you need faith to trust in the Lord to do something, to respond in some way, or to answer prayer in some way? Leadership of Jesus is loving, humble, continues to trust in God, and remembers who its authority is. Now, as we work our way through the study Life of Christ, there are a whole lot more than 50 events that we would look at, more than we're looking at in this study. We're leaving out some important ones, but what we're looking at now particularly is Mark has set this up in his study, 50 Days in the Life of Christ, Knowing Him, 50 Days in the Life of Christ. We're going to go into the book of Luke, as we continue thinking about leadership. And some of the leadership that is out there is leadership that is misunderstood. The ways of Jesus are different than the ways of the world. And we had a conversation together with Kevin and Michelle during our time away about the fact that the ways of Jesus are often vastly different than the ways of the world. And sometimes, even as Christians, we get pulled into wanting to live what we think are the ways of Jesus, but sometimes they're political ways. Sometimes they are ways that are denominational ways, and sometimes those ways don't necessarily align with the ways of Jesus. And we want to look at that, and how did John live? What was his approach at life, and what do we learn from leadership through looking at the life of John the Baptist, beginning in Luke chapter 7, verse 18. Let me get us over there, and we can take a look. There were messengers that were sent from John the Baptist, and here were some of their questions. Now, John's disciples told John, I need to make another little adjustment here. See, I'm pegging out. There we go. John's disciples told him about all these things. Calling two of them, he sent them to the Lord to ask, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else? When the men came to Jesus, they said, John the Baptist sent us to you to ask, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? At that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases. And he was establishing, he was verifying the reality of who he is, and he was performing these miracles to establish, to give credibility to who he was. So verse 21, that very time Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, go back and report to John what you've seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. Now, everything that we just looked at in verse 22 are all things that have happened. Now, we skipped over a section here in Luke chapter 7 about the raising of the dead. But that has also happened, and so there are those who are witnesses of these things, and you look at all the things that are happening: blind receiving sight, lame walking, leprosy being cured, the deaf hearing, the dead are raised, the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that some people today want to reject the fact that the Lord may still do the miraculous. And sometimes he does. Now, he doesn't do it on command like some perhaps think or teach or maybe believe, because there were people that Jesus didn't heal. There were people that he didn't cause to walk. He didn't touch everybody because he left ministry to us. And the ministry, the ultimate of the ministry, is the preaching of the good news that Jesus sets us free from our sin, the good news that Jesus transforms our lives, the good news that Jesus has fit us for a life of eternity with him, the good news that we can learn to walk with God right now. That is the good news being preached to the poor. And yet, sometimes what happens, and it happens in our day as well, when these miraculous things happen, people become very suspicious. But yet God can still do miraculous things. God can still work in miraculous ways. Now, here's what's happening with some of us right now in our thinking. Well, why doesn't God do some miraculous thing in my life? I know the struggles that some of you have. I know the physical illness that some of you have. I know the financial strains that some of you have. I know the relational conflicts that some of you have. Well, we have to come back and say to ourselves, and even as I've had to say to myself, keep coming to the Lord. You keep seeking, you keep asking, you keep knocking, you keep looking for what God will do, and you remain persistent in following after God. And sometimes God will say, okay, I want to do that, but I want you to change something, or I want you to think differently, or I want you to revalue something differently than perhaps you have done before. And so when he says in verse 23, blessed is the man who does not fall away on behalf of me. Really, what he is getting at is the fact that there are people who want to reject all these things, who want to reject the miraculous, who want to reject the fact that he is doing something perhaps even different and approaching things in a different way than perhaps would be expected. Some were thinking, okay, this king is going to show up. He's going to immediately just overthrow Rome, establish his kingdom, and the Jewish kingdom and Israel will be established once again. He didn't do it that way. And so there's that other aspect of people falling away because he didn't do it in their way. God has a plan, and God is working that plan. And part of the plan that maybe John the Baptist didn't see was the plan of how how many would receive sight, how many would learn to walk, how many would be cured of their leprosy, how many would be cured of their deafness, how some would be raised from death to life. Maybe John didn't see that. But this is what is said in this passage. After John's messengers left, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. What did you go out into the desert to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No. Those who wear expensive clothes and indulge in luxury are in palaces. So what then did you go out to see? A prophet. Yes, I tell you, more than a prophet. The one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you. I tell you, among those born of women, there is no one greater than John, yet the one who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. It says all the people, even the tax collectors, when they heard Jesus' word, acknowledged God's way was right because they had been baptized by John. But the Pharisees and experts in the law rejected God's purpose for themselves because they had not been baptized by John. To what then can I compare the people of this generation, Jesus says? What are they like? They are like little children sitting in the marketplace, calling out to each other, we played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not cry. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. You say, here's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her children. See, people were rejecting John. The religious people were rejecting John because they didn't want to acknowledge their own sinfulness. But then they were also rejecting Jesus because he was a friend of tax collectors and of sinners, because the way of Jesus is different. The message of Jesus is different. The gospel of Jesus is different. Jesus was bringing something much, much different to his followers, and so was John the Baptist, a new way, a different way. You know, and so what's taking place right now is John the Baptist is sitting in prison. He's having doubts. So was Jesus actually the expected one, or was he not? You know, how can this disciples to ask Jesus this heart-wrenching question? Are you the one who was to come? Or should we expect someone else? Leaders sometimes doubt even the very things they have clung to for a long time. So why is John doubting? Just a few things that we could point out. In Luke, we read that John's disciples were reporting to John all that Jesus was saying and doing. In Matthew, we read that John heard what Jesus was saying. He began to question. Thus, there must have been something Jesus was saying that caused John to doubt the master. Now, we're going to look at some passages that help us to consider further why John doubts. Now, I've raised back to what types of doubts do you have? And do you have doubts? What is there about your Christian life? What is there about maybe how God does or doesn't answer prayer that causes you to doubt? John had doubts. Sometimes leaders have doubts. And so there's something about this that gives us encouragement that we will also doubt. Here was John, the one preaching, baptizing, we don't know how many people, having his doubts. Friends, you and I will have our doubts. Even as leaders, we will have our doubts. But what do? We come to God and we say, God, help us understand the truth. That is exactly what John did. John went to his followers and said, go ask Jesus this question. And they went and asked Jesus the question. And Jesus said, yes, I am he. Yet John was having doubts, understandably, reasonably so, because he was sitting in this cold prison cell. In fact, he doesn't know it, but he's about to be beheaded. So it is somewhat reasonable sometimes that we have our doubts. Leaders and faith, leaders and doubt, leaders and love, and sometimes leaders have a difficult time loving. Leaders and pride, when we're called to be humble. There are leadership lessons that we learn through even the life of John and even how we process through the doubts that we have. I mean, have you ever had doubts in your Christian experience? I certainly have. Even recently, I've had doubts in my Christian experience. What do? We return back to the scriptures. What do? We return back to prayer. What do? We come back to God and ask him to clarify and to verify in our lives who he is and what it is that he's wanting to do. Well, we have spent the morning here looking at life of leadership, looking at the life of John the Baptist, just this little snippet of time in which he's really questioning, was he correct about who Jesus is? We've maybe considered some of our own doubts and our own fears and our own faith, and may we be challenged, may we be encouraged to trust him, to bring our questions to him, and let him verify for us who he in fact is. Lord, help us to overcome our fears. Help us to conquer fear with faith. Lord, where we have questions, help us to bring our questions to you and allow you to give us confidence as we continue walking with you and trusting in you. Lord, hear our prayer this morning in Jesus' name.